Right, this video is going to pick up talking about the adrenal glands, which are located at the top of the kidneys. We're going to be talking about two parts of them, the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla. So the adrenal cortex is the outer area, and the adrenal medulla is the inner area. And as you might guess, adrenal glands produce adrenaline. But first, let's look at the adrenal medulla. So here you're going to find epinephrine and norepinephrine. And so what these hormones do is that they increase heart rate and breathing rate, and they also elevate blood pressure. So that's going to be our flight or fight response. You also might be familiar with EpiPens, which are a injection that is given to people who have life-threatening allergies or go into anaphylaxis. So one of the discussions that we're going to be talking about has to do with the EpiPen and the fact that the auto-injector that is used to treat it went from like $57 in 2007 and just shot up in price to over $500 today. But the real estimated cost to manufacture this drug is only $1. So the pharmaceutical companies are making bank on people who have severe allergies. The question that will be part of our discussion is, should the government enact laws to control the prices of drugs? So we'll be seeing that a little later on in the week. Moving on to the adrenal cortex, the other part of the adrenal glands, they have hormones, one of which is aldosterone, and that helps kidneys conserve sodium and excrete potassium, and it is also used in the maintenance of blood pressure. And then you have cortisol, and cortisol is a stress hormone, and it also is involved in keeping blood glucose levels stable. And then you have your adrenal sex hormones, which you know are your androgens for males, estrogens for females. Adrenal gland disorders, we're looking at Cushing's disease in puppies because puppies are adorable. So what happens with them is they have an increased thirst and urination, increased hunger, increased panting, pot-bellied abdomen, obesity, and loss of hair. There's a news article that we will be reading on it. And that happens when the adrenal glands are making too much cortisol. So that's an example of puppies. And now for the human example, it's called Addison's disease. And that is also, oh no, this is a different one because it's the hyposecretion. So it's actually not a lot of cortisol is released. So hypo means less. So that means you have lower blood pressure and increased pigmentation are the results of Addison's disease. Next, we'll be moving on to talking about the pancreas, which is also involved in the releasing of hormones. It is a large gland that is found behind the stomach, and it helps maintain a healthy blood sugar. And it contains islands of cells that are called islets of Langerhans, which secrete glucagon and insulin. So when we talked about in the first video the negative feedback loop that involves the liver and the pancreas, this is what we're referring to. So glucagon is something that stimulates the liver to break down glycogen, and this process of breaking down glycogen raises blood sugar, and then the hormone insulin is what decreases the blood sugar concentrations, and it affects the uptake of glucose by the cells. So if you don't have insulin working to bring that blood glucose level down, you will get hyperglycemia, which is something that people with type 1 diabetes struggle with. Both hormones, both glucagon and insulin, work together to regulate blood sugar in a negative feedback loop. The disease associated with this, of course, is diabetes, which I mentioned earlier. So you have type 1 diabetes, which is insulin-dependent diabetes or juvenile onset. So this is usually caused by something that's inherited. It's an inherited immune disorder that destroys pancreatic cells. So they're not producing insulin. and that is going to cause blood sugar issues. You also have type 2 diabetes, which is mature onset, which typically happens in individuals who are overweight, and that you can control through diet and exercise. So, blood sugar tests, we won't get to do any this year because of the online learning thing, but you have to poke your finger and get a certain amount of blood on it. You stick it in a machine, and it tells you your blood sugar levels. So one thing that can result from issues with your pancreas and liver is hypoglycemia. So if you remember earlier, I said that hypo means less. So you have low blood sugar basically. And if they come too low, you can treat this usually with glucose, a direct injection, or by eating something high in sugar, or by eating the oral glucose stuff, which isn't the best tasting, but it gets sugar in your system fast. So that is one way to treat hypoglycemia. One thing that we'll also be talking about is diabetes insipidus. There are a few forms of it. We'll get more into it when we do our case study. But just some general information. It is an uncommon condition. It occurs in the kidneys when the kidneys are unable to conserve water as they perform the function of filtering blood. So you're going to experience excessive thirst, craving ice water, and this, the amount of water that is conserved is controlled by a hormone that we talked about earlier, ADH, which is an antidiuretic, also called vasopressin. And ADH is a hormone produced in the region of the brain called the hypothalamus. So you're also going to have interesting interactions with those hormones there. Another form of diabetes is gestational diabetes. So what happens with gestational diabetes is pregnancy hormones block insulin from doing its job. And then glucose levels increase in a pregnant woman's blood. And this usually starts about halfway through pregnancy. So pregnant women should receive an oral glucose tolerance test between the 24th and 28th week of pregnancy to screen for the condition of gestational diabetes. Diabetic neuropathies are a family of nerve disorders caused by diabetes. So people with diabetes can develop nerve damage throughout the body. Symptoms include pain, tingling, numbness, loss of feeling in the hands, arms, feet, and legs, and it can result in wounds that are really slow to heal. So that is one of the symptoms of diabetes. All right, the other endocrine glands that we haven't talked about, the pineal gland, which is located between the cerebral hemispheres, secretes melatonin and maintains circadian rhythms. So melatonin is usually taken as a sleep aid. Then you have the thymus gland, which is really large in children. So if you actually look at children's x-rays, you can see the thymus pretty well on those x-rays. And it gradually shrinks with age, but it secretes thymosins, which are important for your immune system function. And then, of course, you have your reproductive glands, which are your testes and ovaries, and those are producing testosterone, progesterone, and estrogen. Gonadotropins, or just any hormone that affects the gonads. And then we have steroids, and we are kind of familiar with those. First, we have anabolic steroids, which are artificially produced hormones that are the same or similar to androgens, which we talked about earlier as one of the male sex hormones. In the body, there are more than 100 variations of anabolic steroids. The most powerful androgen is testosterone. And then you also have corticosteroids, and those are used to reduce inflammation that results from an injury or allergic reaction. So corticosteroids are available by prescription. And those are the hormones that we need to know about the endocrine system.